most important piece there, even with all this around us. So for me, it's about particularly in leadership and in management of people, it's working around empathy, understanding communication with them and the needs, because we're evolving, but we're not really evolving as quickly as the technology is, and we still need
Right.
that human touch, basically. Yeah.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. It is your favorite time of the week. It is my favorite time of the week. It is time for Leaders Talk, and it is season 2. As usual, I am your intrepid host, Andrew Dupy, Chief of Communications. And with me today is Ed White. Now, let me take a second to introduce you to Ed here. So Ed is an accomplished biomedical innovator and an author who is renowned for his groundbreaking work in medical technology and thought-provoking insights into organoid intelligence. Did I get that right, Ed?
That's correct, Andy.
Excellent, excellent. Well, so he's got a distinguished background in biology and medical informatics. Ed's career has been defined by spearheading medical innovations from life-saving cardiac techniques to breakthroughs in artificial grafts and other health solutions. Ed, welcome.
Nice
You're
to meet you.
also, and very important to mention, a featured author in the anthology Leadership DNA. That's kind of what brings you here. But yeah, first let's kind of deep dive a little more into who is Ed and what all of that means for the uninitiated out there.
Sure, Andy. Well, nice to meet you and to your audience here today. So I'm Ed, or Edmund, if you want to call me that. Yeah, a little bit about me. So as you mentioned in the bio, I've been working in the biology medical space for about 30 years now. So predominantly sort of in sort of cardiovascular space initially. So working in sort of interventional treatments for patients, and been more recently working in the digital health space and into sort of clinical trial research. And now more recently, actually in the sort of AI MedTech enabled space as well. So kind of worked across many different areas in those years, but always like a strong interest in the patient and making sure that the patient has the best outcomes. Really, that's probably the most important kind of vision in my work each day that I do.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's interesting because I don't know if people immediately think about MedTech and AI in the same thought. Yeah, I certainly didn't. I mean, I'm starting to.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so MedTech AI, I suppose we're hearing a lot about AI now, the last few
Yeah, it's
years,
all over the place.
ChatGPT generative AI, but AI has been going for a long time, machine learning for many, I mean, over decades.
Oh,
So
yeah.
but in the medtech space, it's becoming much more relevant now, more recently. So, for example, you can look at working particular ways to approach an algorithm that can help with a particular outcome for a patient in a better way than had been done previously. So, there's different ways and different therapy areas that can help a specific patient outcome using an AI-enabled technology. And there's large clinical trials going on to show outcomes here, and it's just really a kind of dynamic working space at the moment here, and we're seeing more and more like health professionals adopting these tools and using them in their day-to-day practice. Andy.
A, a working space that is vibrant is also a working space that's got a lot of people trying to get into it. Or at
Yes,
least I would
yes, yes,
imagine
exactly.
so. So how do you stand out from the crowd in that?
Yeah, so we're in a very dynamic world at the moment. We're seeing a
Yeah.
lot of fast technology changes going on around us. And I think that requires a different mindset and approach to what we've traditionally been used to in our working lives. And we've always, I think most of us working in the last 10, 20 years have had amazing developments in technology. The internet started in my career back in the late 90s, and then we had mobile phone technology that came in. So we have a lot of new technologies that we're dealing with and having to see how we can use them in our work. And I think how I work in my play, I think the most important thing is the human connection. So with everything going on around us today, we're getting streaming notifications, everything, the human element is still the most important piece there, even with all this around us. So for me, it's about particularly in leadership and in management of people, it's working around empathy, understanding communication with them and the needs, because we're evolving, but we're not really evolving as quickly as the technology is, and we still need
Right.
that human touch, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean empathy. I want to kind of go into a little bit of a deep dive on that because I know that it's something that was important to you.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, how does having empathy be able to? It's something you integrate into building business and building out in this field because I know that there are some people that don't think that empathy is necessary in all of this.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So, traditionally in perhaps in the 60s and 70s and 80s, management style was very autocratic in a lot of organizations. Empathy probably
Especially
did,
tech. Yeah,
yeah, and probably wasn't a word in the lingo those days. But more importantly, today we're working in much distributed work environments. We're working in hybrid, we're working in office, we're working remotely, and this requires a higher level of communication across those different formats. And empathy is one approach that we can take to really have a better understanding for our employees, to understand their needs and make sure we can get the best out of them, to empower them to be the best they can be in their job. And empathy is a process that can help that really enable those employees to be the best they can in a much more I would say I want to use democratized environment for managing teams in these different formats. So it's an essential skill. As the technology evolves, it becomes even more important that we develop this empathy for sure.
and you said the word teams, and team building.
Yeah,
So for those that may have grown up in let's say Western countries, United States especially, where there is kind of that autocratic idea
yeah,
of everybody's in their place and everybody does their thing and everybody has their goals and you report.
exactly.
How does empathy help with actually changing that and building teamwork?
Yeah, I think it just fosters trust. So if you have an environment where empathy doesn't exist, there can be quite a hostile environment. So I think in the teams I've worked with, for example, and particularly in the COVID time when we were all working pretty much remotely,
Yeah.
there has to be a sense of strong trust with your teams that they're working and meeting the goals and objectives of what you're trying to do. And I think empathy, having that relationship with an employee or your team member, and having that dynamic just builds a stronger layer of trust, because without trust you can't really achieve much, because in the end the organization and the culture can suffer as a consequence of that. So that's why I think it's so important that we have that there as a central element of management for our teams, so that can build a cohesive culture with that trust embodied in it.
And I think you mentioned COVID and you mentioned the timeline where, we went from everybody reports to an office to now we have enormously large infrastructure that is completely now remote. And many of our offices are now these meetings, these Zoom meetings and or Google Meet
Exactly.
or whatever other
Yeah. Yeah.
technology that you choose to actually get together. Um,
Yes.
so, tell me a little bit about what you feel like, how that fosters the need for trust nowadays.
Yes, as I said before, we're working remotely. The supervision is
Yeah,
not someone looking at you at a desk in an office, or in that proximity. So there has to be a trust given to the employee that they will carry out the tasks that are necessary in that environment. And I always say, when our leading teams, for me, it's most important that they are empowered to have those resources to be successful in those environments that they're working, whether it's remotely or if they decide to come in, or as a hybrid approach to work.
yeah,
So for me, that's the most important element there. Really, is to give people almost to be they're almost like their own bosses within the constraints of the organization, so they can be successful, whatever context that is there. But it's really important that, as I said, the main message for me, I think, is very important, is that they feel the need to come for support, but can be also empowered without that support and oversight to get on with the job they need to do and deliver the outputs that are part of their role or on the organization, because so often we're looking at presenteeism time, and you can be productive and have good outputs, but you don't necessarily have to be working a 12-hour day to do that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying, yeah. So for example, I'm just giving an extreme example there.
Well, I mean, it's a good example though, because I know from coming from an office standpoint that there's a lot of waste in an office.
Yes.
When you're coming in and you're reporting for a very long day, there's a lot of that time that's not being done actually doing work. There's a lot of that time that's not done doing efficient work because
Yes.
the office environment can be kind of stifling. So do you feel that this kind of approach is potentially more efficient?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, over my career, over the 30 years I started off very much, obviously, I worked in office environments, and then later on migrated to a remote role before COVID, and also into a hybrid role as well. So I think as long as the efficiency and the objectives are met in those
Mm.
environments, we've got new generation folks working now, younger generation are coming in and digitally native. They're used to the setups that we have in the infrastructure today. So that generation will be working under that new legacy. So we have to ensure that we can continue to work in an environment where we can actually get the best out of our employees. And distractions can happen in the offices, and that sometimes, as you're saying, there's a lot of things that you're not always productive every minute of the day.
Mhm.
But I think a lot of surveys out there have shown that working in an environment where there's less distraction can be more efficient, and that hybrid and the home office environment can be part of that as well. But also there's distractions in those environments. But yeah, so I think migration,
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean,
the
well,
working,
that's just it. There's going to be distractions in everything, and I think that's what
yeah,
sometimes keeps maybe some businesses from making the pivot. And I know that there's still some hesitancy, even nowadays, to continue
yeah.
the pivot to that kind of environment and that kind of role. I mean, there's kickback going on about it in the United States at pretty much every level. Not to get too much into what's going on, but yeah. What do you tell or what do you say to entrepreneurs that are thinking about making the pivot from the kind of the autocratic office-based structure to changing their leadership style to become more open and a little more trusting and give their employees a little bit more leeway?
Yeah, I think it's about experimentation and doing
Okay.
things and seeing results. So, I'm a firm believer in evidence generation. So if we can show good results and outcomes from specific scenarios, then I think that works. So for those entrepreneurs who are still working, I mean, in my environment, for example, most of the people I work with are very flexible and orientated in terms of work. But for those entrepreneurs that are still working in those sort of environments, then you got to test it out. You got to play it out and see if those scenarios work. And then if they do, you can then scale that out a bit further and start transforming the culture of those organizations if it means that work can be done there. Not a lot. Sometimes there's a lot of situations where you can't be in that situation. Essential service organizations or organizations where you're working very much where, I mean, not so much in the entrepreneurial environment, but let's say in public service or in a fire or a healthcare, a doctor or such. You have to be on site. You have to be there. But I think in those environments where you can take some of that out of that environment, then I think entrepreneurs should start considering to explore that and talking and networking with others who have been successful and seeing what the best practice, etc., is there. Yeah.
Okay. So speaking of pivoting, but it's a very slight pivot. So you're an author now. You're in obviously we are advertising you for Leadership DNA, so you have a chapter coming out in that. So everybody pick
Yeah.
that up and give it a read. But what was kind of the inspiring thing for you to make you want to start sharing this more rather than just doing it within your business and continue to
Yeah.
just be your own person and not really worry about getting the word out?
Yeah, no, I think having worked for 3 decades now in the 90s and now I've seen many different things. I've worked across some of the world's largest organizations in healthcare. I've worked in some of the startup companies. I've worked on the manufacturing. I've worked on the service side, and I've worked with many different individuals from some of the world's best, let's say, cardiologists, healthcare professionals, in their field. So I've worked across diverse individual stakeholders worldwide, actually. And I just feel there's a lot of learnings I can give back to people from my
Mm.
experiences. It's my particular perspective on this, and hence was a motivation when you reached out to me to invite me to write for this book, and that's why I was very attracted to do this because I feel it can contribute a lot, you know. And I think over the years you see things and you can see situations and you become more aware of what works best in that situation for those
Yeah.
individuals you're working with. So yeah, that's a little bit about I think where the motivation came from here.
Yeah. And I can also see that from that kind of empathy standpoint of being able to share experiences that help people understand how to do things, how to improve. Because yeah, we're all in our own echo chambers most of the time.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and I like that you're making the effort to be able to actually get other perspectives out there and change. I mean, that's why we wrote Leadership DNA in the first place, was to put something together where we had multiple different points of view for somebody to take something and learn from. Uh,
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean, what do you hope to achieve in the long term with both your business and entrepreneurship, along with authorship? What's your goal in the future for that?
Oh, that's a great question there, Andy. So there's a lot to to be going on. So, as we said right at the beginning, the world's changing very quickly in AI.
Yeah, it could change tomorrow.
Yeah, every day is changing at the moment, literally. I think the most important thing, the North Star, let's say, is
Yes.
really my business is the patient. So I work in an AI-enabled medtech company. We're trying to help patients, in this case, young patients, children with heart defects,
Mhm.
helping the patients and the parents and the clinicians to have better outcomes there using AI technology. And for me, that's really important that we can try and make the best of the technology work in the best way for patients in the business I'm in. Um, my goals for the future are to continue that. I really
Yes.
believe that we can do that, but also we're working on preventative healthcare. So we're looking at ways that we can also use AI technology to help general citizens and individually to have better outcomes in their health. So I think we can use these to really drive through better health, better outcomes for everybody. Now, with my book, which I've written about OI, organoid intelligence, that is really looking at a world where we can also help patients significantly, particularly in the neurological space, where we can look into diseases like schizophrenia, depression, and other neurological conditions where we can look at sort of the brain organoids and we can start using the research there to help improve drug development, for example, in this space where it's traditionally been a bit of an issue, and kind of start going away from the animal-based models that have been used in the past. So I'm very excited about the biological intelligence world, which I see as the next world after AI, and that's hence the journey where I want to move to is into that area in the long term. And I
Yeah.
think, yeah, that kind of
Well,
addresses.
I like it because you're raising awareness that there's a lot more to AI than just writing a writing your college paper for you, or
Yeah,
asking a question on a Google search, or the Terminator coming down the street, which is what everybody thinks of when they see that. There's a lot of
exactly.
really beneficial
Yeah,
routes that we can take that I don't think we necessarily
yeah,
talk about, especially in this direction.
exactly, exactly.
So as we're kind of wrapping up a little bit here, Ed, is there anything that you haven't covered, anything we haven't talked about, like a golden nugget, just something that you want our listeners to take away from either reading your book, reading your chapter, or just listening to you here today?
I think the most important thing for me is one little golden nugget, which actually I have a coach, a German coach who was a veteran in the industry here in the 80s and 90s, and he taught me one thing. He said, one of the most important things as a leader is to be a bridge builder. What I mean by a bridge builder is that you're connecting people together who have different sets of expertise, but coming together, they can actually bring out something truly amazing. And in my philosophy really in any kind of leadership capacity is to be a bridge builder. We all have talent, expertise, but we can bring people together, and to even double that up, that to me is really important. And I think that's something I think it's really important for leadership roles, is to help bridge people together, that expertise, because we're not doing enough of that. And I think we did more of that in the world today, with economy and everything would be in a really good place.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. That's a fantastic thought to lead us with, Ed. How can our audience find out more about you?
Yeah, so I have a website for my new book. It's very easy. It's ai2oi.com. And there you can see all about me, my bio, my book, which is coming out on December the 5th. And you can learn all more from that.
Perfect. All right. And ladies and gentlemen, the links are going to be down below for you to follow. Ed, it was a pleasure having you. I learned a lot. I think our audience has learned a lot. And yeah, we absolutely wish you the best of luck in the future.
Thank you, Andrew. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Wonderful. Thank you.